It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha, it's Feedback Friday, slow on the uptake. Oh my god. It's Friday, guys. We made it. Oh my god, it's Friday. Okay, I am so tired. I feel like what it is like to be drunk. I don't know what it's like to be normal drunk because my receptors are shot. I am weird alien, but I am right now. I'm so tired and overwhelmed. Let's do the help support this channel and we will get into intentions versus outcomes. So help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK, or the GoFundMe to support our groups. Talked a bit about it with the facilitators this week. We're getting ready to go. There's just a few pieces to work out. All the facilitators are going through some real life stuff right now. So there is planning, but I want to start off on a good foot, but there will be some information next week about how you can kind of get in the information queue for the group sessions. And I'm really excited to start the group sessions because, based on some of the stuff I've been hearing, like, I think it's really important that people know they're not alone in the challenges they're facing. And the number of people who thanked me for the Why a Lot of Dating Advice is Bad video, I will definitely do more stuff like that because, yeah, it's always good when people thank me personally for it, not just leaving a comment, but like in chats or through other mediums. I know I've done something right when that happens. Now on to something I did wrong, and this is a good example of intentions versus outcomes. Multiple people apologized to me for not checking in on the the situation in Israel/Palestine, and that was not my intention. And this is the problem with talking about stuff that's raw. I guess it came out as more pointed than I intended. I apologize for that. That was not intended to call out anybody who actually watches these videos. And that was the mistake in my assumption, is I assume that anybody who watches these videos would know I wasn't talking about them because I know they watch, and that would be a dick move. But, the way it landed wasn't that way. So I'm sorry about that. Amusingly, like, on the one hand, I greatly appreciate the people's like, I'm sorry, I should have checked. Like, no! Okay, there's an example of intentions were good all around. Outcomes just didn't land. And I came here and clarified and apologized because my intentions were good. And that is the intentions outcomes cycle. That is how it works. A guy by the name of Jeff Pereira that does work with men, who I've had on It's Not Therapy, said, in the interview I did with him, that if your intentions are good, you should be concerned about, you should care about the outcomes, but you can't control them. So, and one commenter said, intentions and outcomes both matter. There's a saying about the road to hell being paved with good intentions. Good intentions don't always lead to good outcomes. Correct. People on the left tend to act or propose things with good intentions, but that doesn't mean the results always work out. People make mistakes. The thing is to find out what went wrong and try to course correct. This happens a lot with policies that are enacted. And I absolutely agree. I mean, it's funny because people will say I'm more biased against the left, I'm more biased against the right, I'm rougher on the left, I'm rougher on the right. I don't consider that to be true. I'm rough on both extremes in different ways. Because with the right, I think there are people on both the left and the right that have bad intentions. I think there are people on the left and the right that have good intentions and shitty information. And then I think there are people on the left and the right, like this commenter said, who have like a rigid thinking spell cast on them, and they just cannot course correct because ideological purity is what's important to them, and primarily, and that is different from not having good intentions. But after a while, when you keep seeing the outcomes aren't working, at least I change my approach. I mean, I do that all the time. I did it in this video. Like, I'm like, well, that didn't land the way I intended. Right. We'll keep that in mind. It's a combination, right? Like saying that I would never say something, or very, very rarely say, I mean, okay, people could be watching that I don't know about, but I never put something in a video to like the equivalent of subtweet someone. That would be shitty. Sometimes something will accidentally, because I'm just thinking about it, and I it doesn't matter. This is not the topic, but you see, the point is I feel bad about this because some really good people were like, I'm so sorry. It's like, you're such a good person. I appreciate. This is a very Canadian cycle of I'm sorry, you're sorry, but I'm sorry, you're sorry, I'm sorry. And this is how sorry is a love language in Canada, and apparently in Scandinavia as well. It must be the climate. But yeah, that intentions and outcomes cycle. You know, we see it in some celebrity responses to what's going on in the news right now. Certainly to some politicians' responses. I mean, somebody commented from Israel on Wednesday's video. And yeah, I think people who aren't familiar, and again, if you can't follow it for your mental health, that's totally fine. No one is required. No one is required to follow, and no one is required to care in my mind, because if you force someone to care, they can't care of their own free will, and therefore you have taken away the opportunity for someone to sincerely care. That's my philosophy. But, you know, as the commenter said, what happened last Saturday was different. It, you know, it was horrific. And, you know, the commenter said, long story short, and they said that if people saw the horrific images, still think that we're dealing with some freedom fighters, it's most likely that the delusional or psychopaths. And I'm not saying this lightly. You'd have to be so desensitized to not see how effed up this is. But this is the thing, because one, a lot of people get their news from social media, which means they're getting fake news via social media. You know, they're getting disinformation, especially on this issue. You know, people were passing off footage from Arma 3 as news footage. People were passing off things from one story I tracked to 2012 because I recognized it. And other stuff was just fake. And that's the risk when you get your news from social media. I see something on social media and I check, you know, news sources with some quality control standards. Now, on this particular issue, even those were wrong in places. And with war, the first casualty is truth. But yeah, this one is just different. And I'm feeling it not only from people I know who, you know, are either over there or know somebody who's over there. Normally it's, here we go again. This time it's much more a feeling of, holy shit. And that's why the tolerance for the grandstanding has just been, not today, Satan. And I do think that people who are, and this isn't just the left, though. the right tends to be, I don't want to say pro-Israel, because the right is pro-Israel because of the religious right, and the religious right wants Israel to exist so that, you know, people like me will live in eternal suffering and anguish so that the Christians can ascend to heaven. I don't actually feel supported with that, right? So you get somebody like Lindsey Graham talking about a religious war. I'm like, sit down, Lindsay. I paused there because I censored myself about a dirty joke. Wrong place. I cope with humor. Sometimes I have to censor myself. I'm being more careful because of the fuck up on Wednesday. But, so the right's doing that. Then the left is, the squad was usual suspects. A couple of NDP MPs shot their mouths off here. And I think weren't expecting the blowback because they didn't look, they didn't check. They just popped off with the same things they normally do because that's the right answer. And to me, if you actually want to connect with other people, there's no such thing as a universal right answer. And that's the problem a lot of left-wingers get into, is they get, the party line stump speech. They pick it up usually in college, sometimes earlier. And they get out in the real world where people have a more nuanced view. And then when they get pushback, it's like, well, they're just bad people. No, they're not. They have a different experience. And I'm kind of lucky to live, in the Toronto area. I don't live in Toronto. I'm quite a ways out. But, we have halal meat at supermarkets, and then there's Passover food there too. So, Arab communities, Jewish communities, Persian communities, they live like right next to each other here. And so we've got more interfaith dialogue just because it's really hard to live in the Toronto suburbs and not know one or both, somebody from one or both of those groups. And so our conversations are a lot more nuanced, and I think there's a shared feeling of collective helplessness. And popping off with that shit that the squad's been doing is just, it's not reading the room. And I know autistic people hate the term reading the room, but in this case, it's just a question of, like the person said, freedom fighters don't kill civilians, And it's been weird continuing to play through Baldur's Gate 3 while this is going on, because I've been catching myself reading in like news to the gameplay, and it's like, no, stop it. It's a fucking goblin. Don't do that. Just don't. It's a tiefling. Don't. Just play the game. Fantasyland. Elf ears. You are a tiefling who has turned into a weird pain freak. Just go. Just play. Just role play. Just fuck off. Real world. And because I like metaphors, because I like compare and contrast, because I am a comparativist, I just shut that shit down and focus on the fact that, I'm sorry, Dethirsted Gale is still fucking creepy as fuck. Like, oh my god, that guy, Shadowheart is like red flags of triangulation and manipulation. Gale is fucking narcissistic pickup artist love bombing. What the fuck? And like, that's sort of safer, right? And it's I think people like escaping to games because the heroic choice is often easy. And the thing that's cool about Baldur's Gate 3 is because it's more of a what will you do to survive story, that heroic option that we were so used to in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 um doesn't really exist. And like no matter what choice you make, you are propping up some pretty scummy people to get the damn parasite out of your head. Or not. But more on kind of that and how, and eventually I'm going to make a video about whether I think this is an appropriate sequel to Baldur's Gate in terms of the tone, tenor, and purpose of the franchise. But I want to get through the whole game before I do that, because that lack of a heroic option definitely feels like a tonal shift that right now I think is not in keeping with the spirit of the past games, but I haven't completely made up my mind yet. And this is the thing about intending to come at people authentically and to I believe I was talking to a client this week and about the difference between leadership and management. And to me, leadership is about leading by example that people follow, whereas management is telling people what to do. And good leaders know you sometimes have to tell people what to do, but a lot of the time you have to give people options and let them figure out which path is best for them to take. Leaders get people thinking for themselves and creating and bringing something to the company as opposed to just bossing people around. And this particular client, brilliant leader, no interest in management, and he's going to be awesome. But leadership's painful, and leading by example is painful sometimes, but it's good pain. Okay, like I said, my Baldur's Gate 3 character is a pain freak. Maybe this is why. Because in order to lead, you have to take some punches and not respond in kind. And I know I talk about this all the time, but it's really true. Where somebody will make an assumption about me and I want to respond reactively because it feels unfair, but I can't. It's like, no, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Somebody makes a false accusation about me. That's a major thing for me, based on my background. But it's like, don't do it. Don't do it. Just channel all the tricksters, channel all the trickster gods. You're going to get blamed for everything. You're still in every story. Just take it. Because it sucks. It sucks being, falsely accused. It sucks to have people go beyond challenging the outcomes, pointing out how you didn't get a good outcome, and telling you what your intentions were when that's not it. And I work very hard to state intentions on some things, like with the writers group I run. There was a moment where everybody was like, "Oh my god," getting on this, but it was like, it was like a family thing. It was kind of cool because everybody's jumping on this poor guy, but it was because they were so passionate about, and I said, we do this because we love you, not because we're yelling at you, because it was really a moment. And he was laughing, but I wanted to make sure that intent was stated because it was it was intense. Um, and that it sometimes takes only that little. And if you state your intention like that and somebody goes, no, that's not true. It's like, my attitude is the minute someone basically calls me a liar, that's it. I'm out. There's no point in continuing because either they think I'm a liar and what's the point, or they're trying to control me and what's the point? Because if somebody's going, I don't believe you to get you to, I don't know what, trigger a fawn response, I don't understand what that does because I don't have a fawn response. But yeah, I'm not going to prove I'm telling the truth to somebody because I have found in my experience, if someone doesn't want to believe me, they're not going to believe me no matter how much evidence I show them. Someone's got to be open to at least giving me a hearing. The minute they go, no, that's not it, they're closed-minded. Okay, see ya. Bye. You think I'm a piece of shit? Later. I got better things to do. And that's just because otherwise I run headfirst into the train I can see coming. I know I'm going to get really upset. I know it's probably going to get nowhere because this person is demanding I prove something that, they're standing in judgment of me at that point. And there are very few people on this earth I give that permission to, that I will accept their judgments. And that's again because if everybody gets that, then people earning my trust mean nothing. And the thing about trust is, one of the big things about trust is when you trust somebody, you trust that their intentions are good. And that's earned. And I said to a client this week that, this is the point in the discussion where a lot of people have probably said to you, you need to learn to trust people again. And that's the point where anybody who's been, on the client side of therapy goes, why didn't I think of that before? Wow, gee, everything's better now. I said, it's not about learning to trust people again. It's about creating a trust structure where you let people in a little at a time, and you set up little things where you object earlier to things, like, can you not do that, please? A person earns your trust by going, all right, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Sorry. Lesson learned. A person doesn't earn your trust by going, too bad you're too sensitive, and if someone gets that one right, okay, in a little more. And then, I really appreciate it when people show me the consideration when they know I don't like a word. Because I know that's not an expectation that a lot of people set. But I do it precisely because if someone slips and goes, sorry, I know you don't like that word, I'm not offended by the word. I just don't, that is one of those words I challenge. Because I think that you can be more specific. Certain insults are displacements. They are avoiding the actual specifics of the issue you have with someone. But I am also someone who, every time the word should comes out of my mouth, I stop and double check that one. Just because these are things I find make me more precise in my understanding of a situation. But again, I put that out there. I don't like the word bitch, for instance. There's a few other words where it's like, don't do that. Don't like that. And if people show the consideration of, I'm sorry, I know you don't like that word. Well, I'm not going to worry about their use of the word because they listened. And so they get a little further in. And, seeing how someone handles conflict, that's a big approval bump from me. If we can have a productive argument with someone, big trust plus. And that's the structure I've created so that, I don't just, here's my back, stab me in it, right? No, can't do that. Been down that road too many times, not interested. But it does allow people to kind of level up. And that's what the platitude learn to trust actually means. And if you grow up in a functional home environment, which most of us didn't, you learn that almost by osmosis. You learn that by observing and mimicking. And so someone who grew up in that and takes it for granted doesn't know how to explain that to somebody who needs to construct it from the ground up as an adult because they weren't fortunate enough to have that. And that's why I believe that especially in gaming and other elements like that, there is a high level of reactance to people assuming negative intentions until you prove otherwise, which is a major tactic of the left. It is of the right as well, but it functions a little differently. The bad experiences a lot of gamers have, just because they tend to be male, tend to be with the left and prove your allyship. Like, no. Because a bunch of these people were in the exact same boat I was, that, they were telling the truth and people didn't believe them. And so they think the minute somebody goes, well, prove it, you can't, see ya, fuck you. And that's why I think that anybody who comes into the gaming space with good intentions will learn not to do that. They will drop the critical theory, postmodern style bullshit and go, here's what I think, here's my viewpoint. And, when things got a little spicy with the Shadowheart thing, you continue the conversation. And I had some really interesting conversations with people about Shadowheart and met a lot of fellow Team Lae'zel, Karlach, and Astarion fans. Yes, we are correct. But that was a joke. But someone said something really interesting to me about Astarion, and I had to think about it because he was right. And he said that is the character in Baldur's Gate 2 that gets off to the most toxic start because it's actually a physical violation. And I didn't completely agree that it was the worst because, other characters are actively dangerous and haven't told you. And it's actually worse long term because I realized that the number of people I am good friends with now who proverbially tried to take a swing at me when we first met is rather long. Because where I come from, everybody assumes someone else is trying to hurt them, so they hurt you first, or try to. And then it's like, whoa, we cool. It's like the superhero meeting. But that is a very common response for someone who has been abused. And the person who said this to me was correct. And yet, there's more to the story. As opposed to some of the other behavior in that game is never okay in the real world, in a fantasy setting. That's why, see, my take on, and this is my intentions, whenever I do a video and people just jump all over me, it's like, whoa, I still don't understand it, because to me, media is an opportunity to explore concepts from a safe distance. I never assume a show is attacking me. The show doesn't care about me. I can think it's cheap. I can think certain jokes are really cheap shots. Um, I mean, I get really angry at Joss Whedon stuff, but that's because I knew what he was about, and so I knew his intents were shit. He snuck things past people as a fuck you. He did, and he brought a lot of actors who had to say the lines along for the ride. But I knew things that the average person didn't. And so to me, when I talk about the toxic behaviors of, like, Shadowheart or Gale, or the relative irresponsibility of some of the other characters' choices or the expressions of trauma, I never intend it as a criticism of people who may like that character. Because everybody has a different experience. Everybody is seeing something different. To me, it's like, look, these aren't real people. Nobody is getting hurt here. Let's have a discussion. Of course, when my intent doesn't land, I try to see if the other person has a point. And it's led to some really great conversations and some really good friendships and some really, really like deep trust. But that's because I let them come at me once, because the gaming space, the nerd space, is a big old collection of people who have been abused, people who, were essentially enslaved by the social dynamics of the childhood and teenage years. They were they were taught that people would just mistreat them and not tell them why, no reason. Of course someone's gonna come at me. And that's why I say, I am an asshole. So it's like, come at me. Like, you're only gonna get one, but I'll give you the one. Now settle down. Let's have a talk. And I really think we need more people to do that, because if our intention is to improve things, somebody has to make the first step. Somebody has to be, okay, you bit me once. Depending on how much give and take there is, you might get a few more bites, but you betray me, you sell me out, you actually violate my trust. No, I don't accept your biting anymore. I mean, I have a cat that chews on my hand, so, but hurt people. That is learned behavior. But I know so many people who have been subjected to intense cruelty, and they will just torture themselves so they do not pass that on to other people. And that's how they accidentally hurt people, by pulling away or withdrawing, to the point that it hurts people who are trying to reach out. That's not the same. Try to stop the cycle of cruelty is a good intention. People who perpetuate the cycle of cruelty and therefore validate the cycle of cruelty, they know they're being cruel. Intention, outcome, cycle. The circle of life. I need a cat now to hold him up by Simba. Anyway, Lion King references later. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. Or support our groups where we can do this thing, where get people in same space, share experiences, the GoFundMe. Thanks for watching, and we made it to Friday. Have a great weekend!